Tēnā koutou katoa. Morena a tamarie, nau mai hoki mai, nau mai haere mai kia nei akoranga, reo Māori, tikanga Māori, ao Māori, anō hoki o Ace Aotearoa, ko te atahia huri hanganui tōku ingoa. Welcome on in, everybody. Perhaps a welcome back to some of you. My name is Te Atahia Huri Hanganui, and I'm here to facilitate our kōrero, our wānanga today, on behalf of Ace Aotearoa Adult and Community Education, Aotearoa New Zealand. So if you're here to speak about perhaps, learn about perhaps, or explore our values, leading with values to grow our practice and inspire others. What happens if ako, manaakitanga, rangatiratanga, and whanaungatanga guide our teaching, and how are these values perhaps upheld in Te Ao Māori? I'm here to explain some of my own ideologies, some of my own practices based on my stories. So the structure of today's session, ko te hōtaka o te rā, we will have an open and close ceremony. Part of that ceremony will require us to ground ourselves in mātauranga and something that perhaps is larger than us in the here and now. We will have a moment where we connect with one another, and more importantly, we will share and discuss our own views, our own ideas, our own examples of good practice of bringing these values to life in our sector. Nō reira tātou mā ko te whakapuaki. Well, we've now moved into the ceremonious part of this session, bearing in mind that this is part 1 of 2. In a couple of weeks, we will have part 2. But for now, I did want to first disclaim that unfortunately and sadly, my whānau and I are suffering quite a lot of tragedies that have happened suddenly this week. So I will be very honest and transparent. Ace Aotearoa is an extension of my whānau, and because of that wonderful identity, I do have the privilege of sitting quite comfortably in my authenticity. So as I move through the slides today, please hold space for the potential for emotions to be represented or perhaps manifested in physical ways. I will try to keep my composure. But this whakapuaki is as much about practicing tikanga Māori as it is for me to ground myself before allowing some of my knowledge to be transferred effectively to you. So I do thank you and acknowledge your time today, and I hope that you get something out of it, whatever that may mean or be. So firstly, what is happening in Te Taiao? In Te Ao Māori, we tend to decentralise ourselves as individuals, and we think about ourselves as layers always. For example, time is not linear, it is circular, and we are both walking towards the future through the past. We are both descendants and ancestors, and one of the considerations we have through a Māori worldview is that we are the teina, or the juniors, of the natural world, of a much larger ecosystem which sustains us, allows us to feel grounded, to aspire, and to realise our potential, whatever that means for us individually. So one of the practices, of course, is maramataka, our Indigenous time system, the belief that the land, sea and sky were here before we were. There's a lot of information, knowledge and wisdom that comes from those natural features, and for centuries our ancestors, whether they are Māori ancestors or non-Māori ancestors, have been observing those shifts, those changes, those patterns, and they are really the foundation and the blueprint of so many of our knowledge systems that we use today. So to anchor our kōrero today, I wanted to mention what's happening in Te Taiao, in the natural world. Our lunar phase, wherever you are in Aotearoa, is called takirau. And if you're feeling brave, you might want to say that out loud, takirau. Our calendar month is whiringa a nuku. And whiringa means to weave. You might recognise the word whiri from the word pōwhiri or pōhiri. Pōwhiri, of course, is our ritual encounter of two entities becoming one. And so pō talks to the unknown when the two entities are separate. And then, of course, as most of us know with the pōwhiri process, there are different things that happen to require that these two entities at the end become one. The whiri is the weave. symbolically, but also physically that happens in that process. So whiringa ā-nuku, this current calendar month, we're in the 5th of our Māori year and cycle system, is about te whiri or the weave of the sun and the long days and its heat into papatua nuku, into the soils, and the warmth of those soils providing the best nutrients for the blossoming of kai, of food, not just for us, but for the rest of the animal kingdom. And so the new beginnings of spring are upon us, and so too are all of the beautiful things that might come from that. Now, the current lunar phase that we're in, Takiro, is one of the last of the full moons. So if you're anything like young tamariki and pepi, or perhaps you are quite spiritual by nature, or you practice quite a mindful life, you may have felt the intensity of the full moons over the last few days or nights. We've also had a super moon. And so that brings with it quite a lot of restlessness, sleeplessness, but also lots of abundance and activity. And we're just coming down from that high, so energy is medium. The other thing about Takiro, this current lunar phase, is it's all about ceremony and ritual and nurturing the wairua, the spirit. So we're going to do this together very soon as part of our karakia. But I did want to mention a couple more things that you might see on screen before we move through. The atua, or the deity that is part of the full moons, is rangi nui. So we look to the skies, and the way I kind of materialize that in everyday practice is thinking big picture, because sometimes when we're in distress, or perhaps we're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the everyday, thinking beyond and looking up to the expanse of the sky sometimes gives us a bit of clarity and perhaps wider perspective about other things that might be going on around us in the environments and communities that we often experience. So rangi nui. Now, the other thing you'll see on my screen is whiringa ā-nuku, the generic term for this calendar month. Most people know this calendar month is whiringa ā-nuku, but some iwi, like mine here in Wairarapa, and te whanganui a Tara under te Moihi Mātorohanga's knowledge, who was a tūpuna of Kahungunu, we know this calendar month as Urutautahi, because Urutahi was the deity of the tui. So what we learn from that is this is the season of the tui. And if you've been blessed by the song or the deafening cries and shouting of our tui, it's because they are numerous at this time of the year. And that makes sense because there's lots of kai for them to eat. They're getting fat and they're getting social and they're getting chatty. And that's wonderful for us because the more they eat, the more they poop. And the more they poop, the more they're distributing seed, allowing us to have kai that provides sustenance and energy. So hopefully that gives you some positivity for this time of intensity and the coming down from a high of energy. I hope that you feel acknowledged today for your presence and know my haere, my welcome again to all of us. So part of our ceremony today and recognition of what's going on around us is the mihi whakapuaki. Now, typically, if you've been with sessions, been with my sessions in past, I would do this myself, but I'd like to invite you, if you're feeling courageous, to perhaps read alongside with me, and I'll do it slowly enough so that you can repeat. But a mihi whakapuaki is simply an opening address. And the opening address you can see on screen acknowledges the dead, those that we have lost, and any grief that we might be feeling. It allows them to be acknowledged, but for the burden of that grief not to weigh us down. And then we come into the here and now and we acknowledge us, the living, those of us who are left behind, and everything that we might be experiencing, good or bad. Ka pai? The last sentence is the imperative command to move into karakia, and I'm going to teach you a karakia today that myself and my tāne, tēnā koe Davide, who's here with us, and our tamariki have been practicing, which I think is a really lovely one to settle the mauri and to connect into the spirit, even if we're not spiritual. Okay, so feel free to read along with me. Ki ngā mate o te wā, haere, haere, haere atu rā. Kia tātou kua mahue nei, tēnā tātou me ngā tini āhuatanga o te wā. Me karakia tahi tātou. So for our karakia whakapuaki, I'm going to ask you to do this with actions. There is no translation on screen, but we are inviting peace, tranquility and calmness from the skies above, from the ground and the foundation below us, and from the natural world around us, so that we have vitality of life. Te hei mauri ora. So along with me. Kia tau te rangi Māori e. O te rangi e tui honei, o papatuanuku e takoto nei. O te taiao e awhi mai nei, ki runga i a tātou katoa. Te hei mauri ora. Mauri ora kia tātou, and good morning. So a little bit about me, if you don't know who I am, and perhaps just a reminder, who is this facilitator talking your ears off this morning? Ko te ata he hurihanga nui te ingoa, he mokopuna o te wairarapa ara rangitāne Ngāti Kahungunu ki wairarapa Ngāti Hāmua, he tātai whakapapa ōku ki Ngāti Ira, Ngāti Porou te Arawa hoki. So born and raised here in Masterton, Wairarapa, alongside 3 siblings. First language te reo Māori, bilingual living situation, but also kohanga kura kids. And I had the opportunity to move to the Hawke's Bay and then to Wellington, so I call those 2 places home, particularly Pito One and Taputeranga of Te Whanganui Tara, 2 heart homes of mine, where lots of my adolescence years and young adult years happened. That's also where I met my tāne Davide, who is from Italy, and we spent some of our time here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and some of our time in his ancestral home of Italia, specifically down in Sicily, the island off the coast of the peninsula. Our 2 tamariki who drive us and everything that we do. So I have been an educator for many, many years now, with Ace Aotearoa for probably as long as Marae Kura has been around. She's 7 now, so that's an incredible journey. I don't think I'll be going anywhere yet, Viv, because I absolutely love Ace Aotearoa as a work environment and as people who are led by heart. So very, very privileged to be here. And that's probably enough about me. If you have any other questions, bring them into the chat. But who are you? Ko wai koutou. Now, before we open the mihi mihi, and you've probably been here before, we're very tight for time. This is not my preferred means to mihi mihi, of course, but bring it into the chat. Ko wai koutou. Who are you? Where are you from? Where are you today? Anything else you might want to add to that little kōrero, and very soon I'll go silent, but you might notice on screen we've got wai, we've got water, representing ko wai koe, that linguistic phrasing of who are you, but of course the cultural consideration needs to be explicit today, I believe. So wai meaning water. Who are your waters? When we ask of whom, we're also thinking about your ancestral background, your whakapapa. We think about waters as highways. So where were your ancestors from? We think about waters as the womb that sustained life and the puku, or the tapu, the sacredness of the mother who holds child. We think about the 2 waters that created the DNA and the identity of that child. We think about waters that continue to sustain us every year and every generation to come. So it's a big question in a very short amount of time, and I want to acknowledge you by going silent for a moment, probably 1 minute in total, so that I can come into the chat, and I encourage you to do the same in our Zoom chat. I'll see you there, and I look forward to learning who's here with us for our kōrero. Hei a kune, see you soon. All right, wonderful. Keep those mihi coming in, tātou mā. They'll slowly pop up on screen. Hopefully you had a chance to acknowledge one another. And again, because of the tightness of our Western time frame, we, myself and Viv, do look at the chat at a later stage and just want to honour who you are, who your waters are, and all of the goodness and the taonga that you bring. So while that is just kind of simmering down, I want to bring our focus now to the content of our kōrero today. So our values are not just values that we think are incredible values and kawa from Te Ao Māori, but they do also underpin the Ace Aotearoa's teaching standards. So I first wanted to premise this kōrero with the reminder that Jennifer Lay, one of our wonderful ACE facilitators, has been and continues to deliver teaching standards workshops. So if you haven't yet attended, or perhaps you have, and want to know what's upcoming, do get in touch or do keep an eye on our comms. She has been doing an incredible job of moving around the motu and allowing us the opportunity to develop personally and professionally through these values, and intertwine what we do on the ground in our various workplaces, because we are numerous and Ace Aotearoa is here, there and everywhere, but how we make sure that we're doing it cohesively and in a uniting way. So big mihi to Jennifer. Now, these three values and core learning principle, so rangatiratanga, whanaungatanga, manaakitanga are our core values and ako is our learning principle, underpin our teaching standards. So before I perhaps share some stories, look at some anecdotal experiences I've had that have informed my practice as a teacher, tutor, educator, facilitator, but that have also informed the way in which I use my past and present knowledge and wisdom to transfer knowledge for future generations. I would like to know from you what perhaps your connotations, very briefly and without too much deep diving, are of these words. So what I'm going to say is our nama, tuatahi, for example. I'm going to highlight it in our chat, and for a few seconds, maybe 10 seconds max, and I'll count us in Te Reo Māori, I just want to hear your, or see your rather, keywords in relation to the word that I say. Nō reira tātou mā. Kupu tuatahi. Our first word, rangatiratanga. You are not allowed to write a phrase or sentence. The first word that comes to mind, tukua. Put them into the chat. Let's have a look. I'll count us down. Rua, toru, a, rima, ono, whitu, waru, iwa, tekau. So rangatiratanga, ka pai koutou. Kua ea, kia tau ki reira. Let's just stop. Tiriti, leadership, self-determination, leadership again, sovereignty, tribe. Wonderful. Ka pai koutou, you've understood the task. Let's go to kupu na marua, our second word today. Oh, we've got one from Raniera as well, to aspire to. Just snuck that under Raniera, ka pai. Number 2, ko. What do we think of? One word only. Don't think too deeply. First word that comes to mind when we think or hear or read ako. Ima, ono, whitu, waru, iwa, tekau, kia tau. Let's stop there and have a look at our connotations and synonyms. We're doing a bit of a mind map here, tātou mā, because you're brilliant minds. So in one room, we've said that ako means learning, to learn, learning, learn. Class, love that. Reciprocity, love that even more. Orite, rawe katoa koutou mā. Tēnā koutou. Kupu tua toru. Third word for this morning, you've got it on screen, whanaungatanga. Tēnā koe Raniera, starting us off with kinship, relationships, aroha, together, family, whakapapa. Keep them coming. Rima, wha, toru, rua, tahi. I feel like that was the faster of the three. Family, kia tau, connection, kōwhiri. So lots of words around gathering, being in interaction with others, relationships, etc. Rawe katoa, ka pai tātou, and kupu tua whā, our last, but certainly not minimised in its greatness, manaakitanga. What are our keywords associated with manaakitanga? Let's have a look. Militi, kai, I'll come back to them soon. Let's do a bit of a countdown. Te kau, iwa, waru, whitu, ono, rima, wha, toru, rua, tahi, kore kia tau. All right, let's just allow those last few words to come through. And I do want to acknowledge your beautiful minds today. Kupu tua wha manaakitanga, we have humility. Kai. Oh, I like that practical word. Kindness. Whakamana. Care, caring, hospitality, kindness. How confusing must this be for a new person to Aotearoa, New Zealand and Te Reo Māori? They were trying to find out what manaakitanga means. I can see about 25 different concepts in those words. Ka pai. So that's what this is all about, Nē. It's about us exploring what we already know and perhaps using each other's shared knowledge to enhance and progress and develop personally and professionally. So hopefully those words are already very helpful, particularly to those of us who are new to New Zealand or new to ACE, or perhaps new to education. No mai, come on into the wānanga. So the way I'm going to do this from now on, tātou mā, is hopefully have your attention for a bit of a presentation. And this is just to share a little bit of my own learning journey and inspirational teachers, mentors, whānau members, educators I've had in my life, and how they have absolutely impacted upon the way in which I move through my career and my own teaching and learning experiences. And then we'll have some time at the end for you to share yours and perhaps ask questions if you have any. Okay? So, ko te tuatahi, ko te rangatiratanga. My understanding of the word rangatiratanga, which is very similar to many of your keywords, is a servant-style leadership, is the idea that we lead by guiding, facilitating, or holding space to allow the people that we are leading to thrive and to realise their own potential in their own ways. So one key word here is the autonomy or the learner-centred approach, that we don't assume, that we provide buoyancy or uplift so that the person or the people that we are helping or guiding can do whatever they need to do to reach their potential. And the key is in the breakdown or the wetereo of the word itself. Ranga comes from raranga, which means to weave. Tira means a group of people together. And so whatever that means in the different contexts we move in, whether that's in the home, in the community, or at work, how do we embody the value of weaving people together? And I was very fortunate in my childhood to have a very present, hands-on mama, Shelley Marie Rutene, who you can see on screen, and her recognition that her strength was championing us and our full identities as tamariki Māori. Now, Mum didn't have fluency in reo in her young adulthood when she was hapu with me and my 3 siblings, who you can also see on screen. But she recognised that for us to reach our full potential, not only would we have to have all of the nurturing qualities that come with love and manaakitanga and some of the other values we'll discover soon, but also that we would have to do so in a way that never compromised our Māoritanga, our whakapapa Māori, because that's something that she didn't have and she knew what she was lacking because of it. And so Mama was part of the Kohanga Reo committee with the little reo that she had. Mama made sure that she was physically present to nurture us at home, but also at Kohanga Reo alongside our Kohanga nannies, Nanny Mas and Puanga, you can see there in the photo. And then when she started to recognise in me that I had a thirst and a hunger for the learning of other cultures and languages and wanted to thrive in those ways, she would spend countless hours outside of her own work schedule, outside of her own mama schedule, we know that never stops, to create things like flashcards so that I could learn English language quite young in my learning journey. So I remember coming home from Kohanga and being so intrigued by the fact that through different language perspectives, we had different ways of expressing, and Mum would give me little toys that she had made with her own hands and creativity so that we could practice te reo Māori and te reo Pākehā alongside each other. And then every night she would read stories to me in both languages, one to improve her own reo Māori, but also for me to improve my reo ingarihi. And so I attribute lots to Mum, but specific and relevant to my career, my language teaching journey has absolutely been inspired by the rangatiratanga that Mum embodied in my childhood and continues to champion in my adulthood. No reira tātou mā, haha te rangatiratanga, you already know, but perhaps to layer the kōrero today, rangatira is like the mother. The mothers that are like the hull of a canoe, ko te whaia te takere o te waka. So it's the idea of providing a buoyancy, a structural integrity, a stability, and to influence the performance of whoever it is that we are guiding and leading. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of perhaps how we might apply that as educators ourselves with the learners that we have coming in. How do we provide buoyancy, stability, and how do we influence the best possible performance from those learners? Rangatiratanga. Now, perhaps before we move into our second word, I just want to remind you that the chat is always open and the lovely Viv is keeping an eye on that for me. So if anything of urgency comes up and you don't want to wait until the end to ask your question, please do feel free to bring your question in there and we'll make sure that we somehow respond to it either in session or beyond the session. Engari tātou mā, kua tai mai ki te kawa tuarua, so ako. Now, talked about my upbringing, a very special, nurturing, privileged upbringing of being in reo Māori, te ao Māori, the kōhanga movement, of having nannies around me, of having my mum at home with me and my siblings. When we were at Kura, here in Wairarapa, we were the 90s babies, so we were kind of the in-betweeners of the 70s and 80s movements of revitalisation of te reo and all of the initiatives that came from those, including Te Wiki o Te Reo, which we've mentioned in the recent past, but also the creation of these new facilities, institutions, spaces and environments to educate within a Māori framework. So hallelujah, again, very privileged. However, because it was very early days, there weren't many kaiako reo Māori. And so what we found in Masterton in those early and mid-90s years was that some of our tauiwi and some of our Pākehā teachers were having to decide whether or not they would be interested in learning more about the uniqueness of the Indigenous language and culture of Aotearoa New Zealand as a means to provide that unique education to tamariki, and specifically to tamariki Māori. And so my primary school years, again, were this beautiful experience of being in Te Aho Matua, our Māori curriculum, but also being provided to through wellness, through care, through education by tauiwi and Pākehā teachers who had learned and acquired and studied te reo Māori. So ko for me has been the recognition through the models like Whaia Ros Bartosh and Matua Mick Ludden, who recognised that the only way that they could teach effectively was to themselves be learners and lifelong learners. And so Whaia Ros, who you can see on screen, and I've used a picture of her because she has quite a lot of photos that are available for public access, and I'm hoping she will, in a roundabout way, give me permission to be showing you her beautiful face, is Polish, no Porana, ona tupuna matua. Polish and Pākehā, but had, at the time of my schooling, a young son who also had whakapapa Māori. And Whaia Ros went and studied te reo She is now a champion of te reo, has been fluent for all of these decades, and is raising not only her son, who's a dear friend of mine, but her mokopuna, her grandchildren, in a total immersive reo environment. Now, I couldn't find Matua Mix photo that was perhaps appropriate to share. The tuna you're seeing on screen is from his son, who is an artist, Sam Ludden. And Matua Mick comes from Ireland, Airani, still has his accent after all of these decades and is to a koro of Mokopuna. And these two people were in the Wairarapa region through the revitalisation of kohanga and kura, and their contribution to the education sector here is felt in and around the community for generations, and I was absolutely thankful to acquire that. So ako is about recognising you're a teacher and a learner always simultaneously. And someone said earlier, rangatiratanga. It's about equity, it's about tuakana teina, understanding that you can only be a senior if you have a junior, and you can only be a junior if you have a senior. So the model of practice, and that ako is lifelong, that the learning journey never ever stops, and we need to commit and invest in our own personal and professional development. No reira, I've captured that through the kōrero and the stories of Whaia Ros and Matua Mick. And this whakatauki, poipoi a te kākano kia puāwai, nurture the seed and it will bloom. The way I like to interpret this in relation to ako is the idea that it's the long game, that it's not necessarily about our paper qualifications, nor is it about our ancestral intelligence and our own Indigenous qualifications. It's about the recognition that learning is a forever journey, and that if we can nurture the seeds that then become the hua, that then become the plant, that then feed the mind, body and soul, that cycle will continue for generations. Now I am going to pause because I can see the chat has been flashing. I just want to quickly check in with Viv. Are there any papai there, Viv, that I need to talk to before we move on to the next couple?
Raniera had asked, what is Polish in Māori? Olivia's responded with Pōrana, Poland.
Kia ora. Tēnā roa atu kōrua. Now you'll notice, Raniera, while we're there on the subject of transliterations, many of our nationalities and country names or place names outside of Aotearoa are simply loan words or Māori-sounding English words. And while you could absolutely make them up, often in our dictionaries you'll find the most generic terms or the most commonly used ones. Anō reira tātou mā, ko te rangatiratanga, ko te ako, anei te tuatoru, number 3, and we're moving through the history of Te Atahia's life because we've arrived at high school. So until about age 12, I was in kohanga kura. And again, because it was still early days in those days in terms of having access to options and opportunities, we moved to Pitone, and there was one kura kaupapa Māori in Lauhat, and there was one all the way over in Seatoon, Wellington. But for some reason, I had this kind of desire in me to try something different. And so my mum and dad and wider whānau opened up the options by taking me to all of the open evenings, which is typically what happens with our high schools. And I made my way around the different high schools in the Lower Hutt and the Wellington regions, respectively. When I arrived at Wellington High School, which is in the heart of Pōneke CBD, I recognised how really strong their creative arts were, their performing arts, their music facilities were, all of which were interests and hobbies of mine at the time, and I fell in love with the school. As soon as I was there, I knew I was home. And so for the first time in our little whānau language learning journey and education journey, I decided that I wanted to go to a mainstream high school. And so quite a big change for us coming out of Te Ahomatua and kind of the bubble that was our kura beforehand. However, I was very, very lucky in my time at Wellington High to have a number of incredible teachers, incredible exemplars of good or excellent teaching practice. And two in particular I want to name here today. Again, I don't really have permission to share photos, even though I'd love for you to see their faces, but I'm going to name them aloud. One was Annie Millard, a drama teacher, and one was Roger Mantle, also a drama teacher. An ex-school friend of my father's at Rongotai College, but also a performing arts, dance and film media studies teacher. Now, what these two had in common was their ability to foster and strengthen relationships in their classrooms. And some of the practice that I saw in my teenagehood, you know, quite a tumultuous time emotionally and developmentally for us, was their keen interest in who we were fully, not just as students in their classroom. So these were the types of teachers who would be found on the sidelines of our sports games. These were the teachers who sought events, within budget, of course, that we could go to and attend outside of school hours together as people, not necessarily as drama students. These were the people who championed who we were culturally, who made sure that the content of what we were learning in our drama class reflected who we all were and the different diversity that we brought, whether that was ethnically, whether it was interest-based, etc. And they really fostered this idea of kotahitanga, being a family, respecting our differences and moving through those differences keenly. And they did it in a number of ways. What I remember about their whanaungatanga practice was mind, body and soul connection, that they provided a fun, energetic, active, physically kinesthetic, participatory and sensory learning environment for us all to find our unique ways of bringing out the best of us. And when you are so fully secure in yourself, it is much easier to become other characters. That's just a little drama tip that I've learned through their drama teaching. So whanaungatanga, as many of you have already said, is about relationship building, rapport, togetherness, unity, and all of those wonderful things. And I think Annie and Rog, who remain dear friends of mine now in my adulthood and check in once in a while to see how life is and how the kids are doing, are in these two whakatauki. So te reo Māori and its translation in English. Ka oho te wairua, when the spirit is awakened. Ka matara te tinana, the body is alert. He aroha ki te aroha. Love is unconditional. Ka kā te rama e. And enlightenment flows. So that real ability to bring life to the learning environment and a space that feels safe for everyone to be their unique selves and contribute to a wider cohesion of working together. Ko tērā te whanaungatanga, and a big mihi to my high school teachers, Annie and Rog. Now, I don't want to really reveal my age, but we're getting into my adulthood now. Not long after high school, I had these wonderful overseas experiences and lived and learned in Costa Rica and then Italy when I met Davide. However, part of that journey was tertiary study. And one of the many iterations of that for me was formerly at Victoria University of Wellington, te herenga waka, te upo tika, te whare wānanga ki ko. And so I do want to mention that there were many, many teachers and lecturers and professors in that time that provided me manaakitanga, but one in particular was Matua Mike Ross. Now, he was a family friend of mine growing up in Pitone, so we already knew one another. But when I arrived at uni, I had just had my baby, and I was a mature student, an adult student. So I was already feeling very out of place with all these young people fresh out of high school with very different interests and priorities as me, particularly beyond the learning of the day. And what Mike did to embody manaakitanga was reminding us of what it means. Mana is the inherent integrity and identity and power we all have within us. And iki is to support, so it's a verb, aki or aki, to support, encourage or uplift. So how he supported, encouraged and uplifted my mana was recognizing my needs and providing respect, kindness and hospitality around those needs. And so he did things like provided a toy basket in the corner of each of my sessions, whether it was at the marae or in the classroom, so that my baby, if he was with me, had something to occupy his hands and his time and his focus. Mike was often seen holding little baby Mario in the middle of lectures so that I could have my hands free to take notes and discuss with my peers what we were exploring in the moment. Mike, alongside some of his colleagues, made sure that we had access to cots for our babies who were on site with us, our tamariki tū, to high chairs for when they needed feeding. And we were always nurtured, of course, through the wonderful learning environment that is Te Herenga Waka. And many of our learning environments have these, access to kitchen, to kai, access to the outside world, to nature, to grounding physically in the natural world. So he kura te tangata, our humanity is precious. And I think if we can think about that when thinking about manaakitanga in practice, we will very quickly start to look at not just words, but concepts in English that are numerous, which is why our brainstorm was so large and long. We're thinking about respect, showing kindness, generosity, reciprocity. We're thinking about warmth, affection, empathy, compassion, a nice mattress to lie down on rather than a hard chair when it's getting a bit tough. Group work so that we can externalize internal thought and not feel alone. Reflective practice so that we can learn about our own ways of receiving knowledge and whether it's appropriate or not. And of course, all of the nurturing qualities that come with being people before being students. So nui rawa atu te mihi ki oku pou me ki o te whare wānanga. So a big mihi to those who embody that through my uni days, which arguably continue today. However, hopefully that has given you a little bit of an insight into what I think manaakitanga has been, at least for me. In closing and in summary, my learnings through my own education journey have reminded me that rangatiratanga is about leading through example and about serving. Manaakitanga is about respect and kindness for the people who I'm working with and alongside and for. That it's also about ako, that I need to practice what I preach, that I need to come with humility and humbleness when I am part of that knowledge transfer. And that whanaungatanga or kotahitanga, the development of relationship, means time and focus in all of my offerings for people to feel seen and acknowledged, and to open a two-way conversation. So to end, this is your chance. Your chance to kōrero to bring in some of your thoughts. And what we'll do is we'll use those thoughts to premise and to infill the content for part 2 of our kōrero in a couple of weeks. So what we're going to ask you to do, if you can, is jump on a second device. Perhaps it's your phone, it's another laptop, and we're just going to move over to something called Menti. Now, Menti is a way that we can capture all of your kōrero anonymously. So what we're going to ask you to do is on your device is come into www.menti.com. It's going to ask you for a code, and Viv will input the code into the chat as well, but you can see it in the top center of our screen right now, 44214798. And this is your chance to share your own reflections, your own examples, your own stories, with the 4 values in mind for manaakitanga, rangatiratanga, whanaungatanga. How do you create a more inclusive and nurturing learning space? This is what we're here for. I've talked about some examples from my own learning journey, the exemplars of excellent teaching practice. I've hopefully woven that into the way in which I present myself as an educator. But for now, it is your turn to share. Now, bear in mind, Menti will capture this. You don't need to include your name if you'd like to remain anonymous. We will see them slowly pop up on screen. So for the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to go quiet and just turn my video off so that we can allow time for this to happen naturally and with flow. See you soon. Hea kune. So perhaps you have already very kindly shared some of your ideas and examples. And if you are one of those people, I do invite you to look up on screen and to perhaps read some of the others. You will get these ideas as part of your resource pack. So I can see quite a lot of wonderful examples. Some are really practical, like offering space and time for breaks, kai and inu, and that might be within the session or perhaps at a certain time before or after sessions. Maybe it's a really dedicated time in a course, like the last day might be a shared kai day for everyone. Greeting learners in their own languages, which talks to quite a few kōrero around developing relationships, letting students explicitly talk about what a safe learning space means for them. Flexibility. So structure and flexibility has come up a number of times on screen. Guiding, of course, so having some kind of learning outcome framework, but at the same time being guided by that learner-centeredness that comes with what are your expectations of me as a facilitator, and what are your expectations of this learning environment, and how best can we make that work for, if not all of us, most of us. Taking the learning outside, I love that. So thinking beyond paper and pen and perhaps bringing learning to life through doing and experiencing. I can see that some of you are really good at being honest in your own mistakes and your own struggles, coming authentically with all of yourself. Being someone to aspire to, how beautiful. Some of you bring in tikanga, so I assume that's tikanga Māori, or perhaps your own tikanga, whether that's your own personal approach to tikanga or allowing conversation to happen so that we're ensuring other tikanga are being honoured. Lots and lots of wonderful, wonderful ideas. Nō reira, tēnā rau atu tātou. Now, we're kind of moving into the whakakapi of this particular session, but again, a reminder that this is only part 1 of 2, and we will absolutely come back into these and deep dive. But I do want to provide an opportunity for any questions you might have. So I'm just going to click through to the next slide and allow those questions to be manifested here on screen, so that if we don't have time to address them now, or for me to voice my own responses to them, we can move them again to part 2 in a couple of weeks. Nō reira, he pātai o koutou. Do you have any questions or curiosities about what has been presented today and our learning outcomes for this session? Understanding the 4 values that we have explored and how they can provide a more nurturing, safe learning environment in our ACE sector. Another couple of minutes, I will go quiet to allow you time to perhaps feed into this. Otherwise, we'll see you back in the presentation very soon. Hea kune. I just want to honour the questions that have come through too, which are very similar, that talk to how do we establish whanaungatanga, or that value, how do we bring it to life in short sessions and in those spaces or contexts that we are time precious about. We might not have time to establish really deep connections, so how can we still embody that whanaungatanga value? We might have a look at that next week, next session. Where are other places where we can learn and develop understanding of these Māori values? So, of course, Ace Aotearoa is only one provider, and as you know, we've only had 1 hour on this, but they're immense. They're very, very important, and I'm sure we all understand that. Where else can we go to develop these skills? So we can absolutely look at that. Perhaps I might have a list somewhere that I can share of some reputable providers, learners, educators, other means of gaining more insight. And when you can make an error in judgment or management of these values in class, how do you mend it? How do you own when you've made mistakes yourselves, especially as facilitators of learning? Thank you so much for your questions. And I'm very sorry we don't have time to talk to them now, but I'll mull on them. It's quite good. I'll have some time to think about the best way that I can respond. But we're going to go back now to our presentation screen and just slowly wind up. Hei whakakapitanga kia tātou if you're new to ACE, and I apologise if we're broken records, but we're pretty awesome. And we would love to get to know you in a room, a kanohi a tinana nei, physically embrace you. So come along to our hui whanau if you can, our national conference if you can. They are annually. Come into our newsletter space so you know what's going on in our wonderful sector. In all of the various iterations of our sector, we work in marae, we work in community, we're in learning centres, we're in institutions, we're in organisations. We are massive, and we absolutely provide education to anyone and everyone, very much a tiriti-led and based organisation. So come on into the whānau if you haven't already, and come and share your taonga with us. No reira tātou mā, koina te akoranga kia tātou i te ata nei. Tēnā arawa atu koutou i o koutou pūkenga, o koutou wheaho, o koutou kōrero hoki. I want to acknowledge you again for investing time on your Friday morning in a very tumultuous world, very overwhelming world that we're in, to develop yourselves personally and professionally, to share some of your gifts and to provide us with this opportunity to connect. We're going to go through our karakia again, and I want to acknowledge Māori o Kapua Marae Kura Ana here, my little darlings who are not babies anymore, although I like to think that they are, who provided the actions to our karakia, which brings peace, calmness and tranquility to all of us. Together, kia tau te rangi Māori e, o te rangi e tui honei, o papa tuānuku e takoto nei, o te tai ao e awhi mai nei, ki runga i a tātou katoa, ti hei, Māori ora. Māori